Song of Solomon chapter 5. We've got a lot of ground to cover. And so I'm going to give you a lot of running commentary. Not my favorite way of teaching or preaching, but I think the best way to get these verses through. Song of Solomon chapter number 5. So far, the Song of Solomon has been very romantic. It has been mushy. It has even been erotic or passionate at times. It is a story of courtship, love, marriage, honeymoon, all of that. And there is truly no other book in the Bible like the Song of Solomon. It has been a fairy tale romance. It is a real life Cinderella that meets her prince, only the prince is not a prince, he's actually a king. Last week in chapter 4, we described what I believe is the honeymoon night. And I realize that the approach that I'm taking to Song of Solomon is not the only way to read the book. In fact, it's not even the most common or popular way to read the book, but it's what makes sense to me, and I've tried to just focus on the primary application as we've gone through the book. However, no matter how much you love one another, and no matter how determined you are that your marriage is going to be a perfect marriage, and no matter how wonderful your marriage is, it is inevitable that marital disputes are going to happen. Now, we've got one couple that's engaged. We've got Aaron and Trinity, and I don't want everything directed toward them too, because they would be the only two in here that doesn't think so. They don't think that they will ever have a fight. I don't know. But it will happen. Because two imperfect people can only have an imperfect marriage. When two sinners decide to marry and move into the same house together, no one lives happily ever after with no conflict. Now, I have known some marriages that I have had to counsel where it was nothing but fighting and shouting and bickering and bitterness and anger. And you wonder what did they ever see? Why did they ever think that this was a good match? It certainly wasn't made in heaven. But then there are marriages that seems to be full of love and patience and kindness, and we could look at even some couples in this church that we would look at that Eric, we could look at some we could look at some couples that we say, man, they probably never have a fight, they never have an argument, but even the most wonderful marriages still has challenges and still has conflict. And what you have to learn to do in order to live with another person is you have to learn how to compromise. Right. Any man who has learned to live peaceably with a woman will tell you that he has learned to let little things go and not be so uptight over every little matter. You have to learn to give the other person space, to give the other person some grace, to learn how to be patient, to learn how to speak kindness and not anger, if you're going to survive this thing called marriage. The guy who wrote the book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, or Women Are From Venus, Men Are From Mars. I forget which one I'm from, but sometimes Mars and Venus collides. Sometimes it does. And so everything up to this point in this book has been about courtship and marriage. They're married, some time has passed. I don't know if it's a week, a year, a month, I don't know. But now we have the first conflict. And as you read through the conflict that's described in chapter 5, it seems apparent that the first fight that they have is over the bedroom. And that can become a common battleground in marriage, but really anything can become a battleground. It might be in-laws. It might be finances. It might be a job. Your wife may complain that you work too much. It might be that she complains that you don't work enough. You need to go out and get a job. It might be that. It can be kids, disagreement on how that we ought to discipline or raise our children. Anything can become a point of conflict in marriage. And in the section that we're going to cover this morning, chapter 5, verse 2, all the way to chapter 6, verse 9, tells us two things. That marital conflict is inevitable, and marital conflict can be resolved. So we're looking at chapter 5, verse 2, down to chapter 6 and verse 9. I'm going to run through the verses quickly. And the first thing I want you to notice is I want you to notice their conflict. Look, if you would, in verse number 2. Shulamite is speaking. She says, I sleep, but my heart waketh. It is the voice of my beloved that knocketh, saying, Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my undefiled. For my head is filled with dew, and my locks with the drops of the night. Now something's wrong. Shulamite speaking, she's telling you that she is having a dream. She sleeps, but her heart awakes. It is the second dream in the book. It is not a pleasant dream. And everything that she describes in the dream may not have actually happened, all right? But it's her way of saying that there is a problem in our home. The problem is real. It's not fantasy. There is something that is wrong. Now, here's what the dream is about. She has gone to bed. It's late at night, and Solomon comes calling. He comes home. She hears him knocking on the door, calling to her. He wants to be let in. And as you read it, it becomes evident that he's interested in being with her intimately, but she's in her bedroom. She's sleeping, and the door is locked. Now, it may seem odd that Solomon's knocking to get into the bedroom. However, in that time and place, it wasn't unusual for married couples to have separate bedrooms. And so Solomon wants to come into her. He wants to be with her. It sounds like it's late at night because he says, my head is filled with dew and my locks with the drops of the night. I can only surmise here, but it's probably because he's working late. A king doesn't have a 9-to-5 job, all right? Sometimes it calls for official business late, and so it sounds like he's come home late, and he tries to sweet talk her. Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove. He calls her every sweet name that he can to try to get her to open the door. So in verse 3, she says, I've put off my coat, how shall I put it on? I have washed my feet, how shall I defile them? Now that sounds like a really lame excuse. And that's exactly what it is. It's a lame excuse. And maybe she's miffed because he came home so late. Maybe they've been arguing. Maybe who knows why. I don't know. But it's late. I'm already in bed. I've already taken a bath. I've put my night clothes on. I'm comfortable under the covers. And again, I think there's a clear inference here that there is romantic advances. She is rejecting that. But she's thinking about herself. I'm going to punish him. I'm going to prove a point. I don't know. But he comes lovingly, and she turns him away. I've put off my coat. How shall I put it on? I've washed my feet. How shall I defile them? So verse 4. My beloved put in his hand by the hole of the door, and my bowels were moved for him. I don't know exactly how doors were made back then, but somehow he slips his hand through the door, some key or some hole, and he's trying to unlock the door is what he's trying to do. He's trying to get in, and then he leaves, and then she wakes up. And when she wakes up, she realizes that Solomon was there. He was trying to get in. He wanted to be with her, and she had rejected him, and now she feels bad. My bowels were moved for him. Strange statement. If you study the word, I've preached on it before. Bowels usually speaks of compassion, and she's being compassionate for her husband. You know, sometimes when married couples have conflicts, they allow those conflicts to build and to breed resentment and bitterness and anger and unkind words against one another. And sometimes when a couple has a conflict, there is a standstill between them, and the standstill will eventually become a shootout. And they can literally live together but hate each other. because of years of unresolved problems. And the Shulamite, she's far from that point, but here's what she realizes. She realizes that she has offended her husband. She has been unkind. She has hurt him. And he doesn't want to stay and fight. He doesn't want to make it an issue. He just silently goes away. And so he goes away. She wakes up and realizes what she has done, and she didn't want to hurt him. And by the way, this is probably a good place to address something in the Song of Solomon that I've not talked about yet, and that is Solomon's polygamy. The thing that really complicates the love story of Song of Solomon is that he was a known polygamist. 700 wives and 300 porcupines, or concubines. Concubines. Is that what he had? Yeah. That's a prickly situation right there. We like to believe that the Shulamite was his first love, but certainly was not his last. And it's possible, this is only speculation, it is possible that the conflict in this chapter is caused by that very problem. We're not sure. If you hold your finger here, look at chapter 6, and we'll come to this verse here in a minute. But look at chapter 6 and verse 8. There are 80 queens and 80 concubines and virgins without number. Now, it sounds like that at this point, that Solomon has 60 queens or wives and 80 concubines. That's what it sounds like. Okay? If that is so, if you put that in the framework of this story, then it's very possible that the Shulamite has refused him because of this very problem. I'm speculating here, all right? But I don't want to gloss anything over. This was a problem in his life. Either way, she's angry, she's hurt, she's resentful. And if this is the problem, she has good reason to be all of those things. Because if he had truly loved her, then how could he do this to her? And I'm interjecting here. I want you to understand that. Because we don't know what's happening behind the scene, but it's something to consider. They've got a conflict. He wants to come in. He wants to be with her. She makes excuses. He goes away. And now she realizes what she's done. The conflict. The second thing that I want you to notice is her chagrin. Now, I thought, boy, that's an odd word. You don't hear that word in the outline. It sounds like I'm forcing the alliteration. But I looked up the definition of the word. And the word means vexation. It means to be mortified, to be disappointed, shame. That is exactly what she begins to feel when she realizes that she has offended her husband. Look, if you would, in verse number 5. She says, I rose up to open to my beloved, and my hands dropped with myrrh, and my fingers with sweet-smelling myrrh upon the handles of the lock. I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had withdrawn himself and was gone. My soul failed when he spake. I sought him when I couldn't, but I could not find him. I called him, but he gave me no answer. She wakes up. She realizes that in her slumber, he had been there, been trying to get in. He'd been calling to her, sweet talking to her. She had rejected him. He's gone away somewhere. She realizes what's happened. She jumps up. She runs to the door. She flings it open, and he's gone. And she peers into the night, and she calls his name, and she wants him to come back. And she knows that she has hurt him and she feels terrible. This is not how she wants their marriage to be. She calls, but he's gone. So in verse 7, the watchmen that went about the city found me. They smote me, they wounded me. The keepers of the walls took away my veil from me. Now, since this is a dream, we don't know if all of these things actually happened or if it is her dreaming. We don't know. But here's the problem. The problem goes from bad to worse. You see, one problem just creates another problem. I was talking to somebody this week, and we were talking about how that sin sure complicates life. It sure complicates life. And it's not likely, I don't know, that she went out into the street and she was literally beaten up. But maybe she feels like that she deserves some punishment for what she has done. And a problem in a marriage left gone, a way of multiplying. One problem can become two, and two becomes three, and three becomes four. This has gotten much bigger than what she wanted. He's gone. She's searching. She can't find him. She's calling. He's not answering. This is not what it's supposed to be. And there's a lot of people that live in a marriage just like that. The little problems go. And then it becomes two. It becomes three. And by the time it gets to crisis level, and they come talk to most people that come talk to me about counseling or problems, whatever, Brother Dave, by the time they come to me, there's not a whole lot I can do. And I know that I'm supposed to have all the answers. I'll give you 4 steps, you do these 4 steps, and it's going to erase all of the damage that's been done. That's simply not reality. This is bigger than what she wanted it to be. So in verse number 8, I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if ye find my beloved, that ye tell him that I am sick of love. Do you know the pain that you feel in your heart when you have hurt somebody that you love very deeply? There's a lot of things that prevents me and you men from having an affair. One of them obviously is our love for our wife. Can you imagine, I hope none of you have ever had to do this, but can you imagine what it would have to be to sit down with your wife and confess to her that ultimate betrayal, and to see the pain in her eyes and realize that you caused it. You created that pain for her. She has hurt him, and now she hurts. She's chased him away. She's gone too far. It may not even be all her fault, but who cares whose fault it is? This is where we're at. There's so much to the backstory that we have to guess at, but it is very clear that there is a conflict that is presented in this dream. She is accepting blame. It may not be all her fault. Solomon may or may not be the innocent party. We simply don't know. But the most glossy and the most glamorous of marriages will have conflict. You bring your sins, you bring your weaknesses, you bring your faults into that marriage, and selfishness and inconsideration and greed and temper and defensiveness, all of that, it boils toward a perfect storm. And there will be a time when you hurt your spouse and when your spouse hurts you. And sometimes the response is to lash out, to strike back. You said this, I'll say that. You did this, I'll do that. Sometimes the response is the silent treatment. I'll just sulk and pout and not talk to you for 3 or 4 days. Sometimes the ultimate revenge is to sin. It's to go having an affair. It's to meet somebody on the job. But conflict is inevitable. If you look in verse 9. That chorus of the daughters of Jerusalem, what is thy beloved more than another beloved? O thou fairest among women. What is thy beloved more than another beloved, that thou dost so charge us? Now when we're reading what somebody else says, we're not privileged to read the tone in which they say it. We don't know. And maybe the tone of voice that these daughters of Jerusalem, this chorus, maybe the tone is what kind of man would treat you like that? What is he so special about him? I mean, you've got a right to be angry. You deserve better. What is it that you saw in him in the first place? Maybe that's the tone. I don't know. But here's what it does. It makes her stop and think. Why do I love him? What did I see in him? And in the following verses, she's going to tell you why she loves him. So look at verse number 10. She says, my beloved is white and ruddy, the chiefest among 10,000. His head is as the most fine gold. His locks are bushy and black as a raven. His eyes are as the eyes of doves by the rivers of water, washed with milk and fitly set. His cheeks are as a bed of spices, as sweet flowers. His lips like lilies, dropping sweet-smelling myrrh. His hands are as gold rings set with a beryl. His belly is as bright ivory overlaid with sapphire. His legs are as pillars of marble set upon sockets of fine gold. His countenance is as Lebanon, excellent as the cedars. His mouth is most sweet, yea, is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. I've heard that passage preached as a description of Jesus Christ. I don't believe that it is. Okay? I struggle trying to find many parallels in that, all right? It is the first time and the only time in the Song of Solomon that the Shulamite describes the physical appearance of Solomon, and there's a lot of imagery here. And I don't think the point is that she loved him because he was a good-looking man. I don't think that's the point. Obviously, right now, he looks better to her than anybody else. But she's chased him away, a man that she loves very deeply. I want to zero in on one word. Look at the last statement of verse 16. This is my beloved and this is my friend. That's what he is. He's my friend. And friendship is the linchpin to a good marriage. Because friends forgive each other's failures. Friends accept one another for who they are. Friends trust each other. Friends take up for each other against the world. She realizes he's my closest friend. That's who my beloved is. So you come to chapter 6. I believe that the dream continues. And in verse number 1, the daughters of Jerusalem again. Whither is thy beloved gone, O thou fairest among women? Whither is thy beloved turned aside, that we may seek him with thee? They're convinced he is special. This is what he means to me. So let us help you find him. Where has he gone? And it sounds like that maybe the dream is ended. She begins to deal with what is really happening. If you look in verse number 2, she says, my beloved is gone down into his garden, to the beds of spices, to feed in the gardens and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He feedeth among the lilies. Now, in chapter 4, we talked about gardens. You remember a lot of talk about gardens. And I said that all of that language, it is metaphor, it is euphemism for their love, marital love. So now she says, he's gone down into his garden, to the bed of spices. She's using the same language. I believe it is the same imagery. I believe it's the same metaphor. It's the same euphemism that she's describing. And I believe that what she is saying is that Solomon has come back to her. They are engaged in intimacy again, indicating that the conflict has been resolved and they're back on good terms again. I believe that's what verse 2 and 3 is indicating. And I say that because of what the rest of the chapter is now going to say. You have their conflict, her chagrin. Now you're going to have his consoling. Look at verse number 4. He's going to speak for the first time. He says, thou art beautiful, O my love, as Tirzah, comely as Jerusalem, terrible as an army with banners. Solomon's going to speak for the first time. He hasn't spoken at all in chapter 5. Now Solomon speaks, and his words are the same as they have always been. He compares her in verse number 4 to two cities, Tirzah and Jerusalem. Tirzah was a city in northern Palestine. When the kingdom, when Israel divided between the northern and southern kingdom, Tirzah was actually the temporary capital for the northern kingdom for about 50 years. So this is after Solomon's death, of course. Jerusalem, of course, beautiful city, grand city, city of the world. And so he's comparing her to two beautiful cities. And Jerusalem is the joy of all the earth. And so Solomon's telling her, you are beautiful like those two cities. Look at verse number 5. He says, turn away thine eyes from me, for they have overcome me. Thy hair is as a flock of goats that appear from Gilead. Thy teeth are as a flock of sheep, which go up from the washing, whereof every one beareth twins, and there is not one barren among them. As a piece of pomegranate are thy temples within thy locks. So let me ask you a question. Does that sound familiar to you? That's what he said to her last week in chapter 4. Right? And here's the point. He's telling her the exact same thing that he said before. Before the conflict and after the conflict. He's telling her that I haven't changed my mind about you. You are just as beautiful to me now as you were before. I'm still devoted to you. No hard feelings. Doesn't demand an apology. Doesn't insult her. Doesn't strike back. Doesn't call her names. Because the natural thing is to strike out. But the godly thing is to forgive and to communicate that forgiveness to him or to her. She hasn't changed her mind. Describes her in the exact same way. So then we come to verse number 8. There are 80 queens and 80 concubines, and virgins without number. My dove, my undefiled, is but one. She is the only one of her mother. She is the choice one of her that bare her. The daughters saw her and blessed her, yea, the queens and the concubines, and they praised her. That's a very difficult passage. I'm not sure that I know what it means. Most commentators say that Solomon is referring to his harem of wives and concubines right here. And if he's not, then to be honest with you, I don't know what to make of the statement if that's not what he is saying. It sounds like that Solomon is saying that he has 60 wives and he has 80 concubines, but she is the one true love. Now that's what it sounds like. If that is what he's saying, I don't see how that is very consoling. You are 1 in 81. That's I don't know that is a big help. Some commentators go to great lengths to defend Solomon by suggesting that all these other wives were political arrangements. They were marriages for the sake of politics. Some have even suggested that maybe he wasn't intimately involved with any of them. That is pure speculation is what it is. We're trying to guess is what we're trying to do. If these are not his wives, I have no idea what they're referring to. If they are his wives, I don't know how this is comforting. And Solomon's polygamy is a blight on a wonderful love story, but the Bible never glosses over the sins of other men, even good men. And so I give you two choices. You can take either one that you want to. But the gist of verse number 9 is, I can have any woman I want, but I want you. I want you. That's the gist of verse number 9. And that would be consoling to her. That I do love you. We've had our spat, we've had our conflict, we've had our disagreement. Maybe I was offended, maybe I was hurt, maybe we're both to blame. None of that matters, but in the end, this is not how I want it to be. I want us to love one another. I want us to be friends. I want us to be together. I want us to be close. Now, I give you a very quick running commentary on a lot of verses. And the point is that marriage is when two deeply flawed people come together. When my wife and I got married, I was 22, she was 19. I don't think either one of us was ready for marriage. We got married in a hurry. We were poor as Job's turkey, and those first few years were a little bit rocky. And we had really for the first few years of our marriage, it was quite contentious. My wife is a very she's hot-blooded. She is from West Virginia. She is fiercely loyal. Fiercely loyal. And I was the king of the mountain. I was King James and she was Queen Jennifer, and we both decided to move in together. And a lot of conflict, a lot of fight, a lot of arguments in those first few years. And to be honest with you, 90% of them was my fault. Because I saw it as my duty to help my wife fix all of her flaws. She had the stubborn notion that she didn't need fixing. And we had a conflict between Mars and Venus. I mean, we really had some wrecks. And I tell you, that the greatest day of our marriage outside of the day that we got married was the day that I learned, I love you just as you are. You accept me with my faults, I accept you with your faults, and I quit trying to fix you. And disagreements and issues must be confronted in a marriage. Ladies, when he asks what is wrong and you say nothing and that's a lie, that's a lie. You're not helping your marriage. That doesn't help anything. Loving confrontation has two parts. It is love and it is confrontation. And to confront without love is judgmental. It is harsh. It is mean. But to love without confronting is enabling, and it is cowardly is what it is. And what you have to learn to do is you have to learn to examine the offense, and you have to learn to examine you. What are you fighting over? Is it worth bringing up? Is it worth all the conflict and the strife? Is it a matter that really needs to be fixing, or is it you just being a bore and a nitpick on every little thing? Is it really that major, or are you just making a mountain out of a molehill? You can apply that to all areas of life. I mean, when the waitress is 5 minutes late, should I chew her out, or should I just ignore it? How big of a deal is this? And some things are better to just let go. And a wise man will know when that is. Proverbs 19 and verse number 11, the discretion of a man deferreth his anger. It is glory, his glory, to pass over a transgression. And if there is an issue that is truly bothering you, then it needs to be dealt with when it's troubling you, and you have to have that conversation. But if you are a perfectionist and if you are impossible to please, you're going to cause undue stress on your marriage just because everything has to be a major deal to you. And there are some matters that just don't matter. And you have to learn what those are. Now, let me be practical for 3 minutes. Let me give you 5 ways to resolve conflict in a marriage, because that's what this passage is about. 5 statements. You ought to write them down and then give it to your husband. Number 1, focus on one issue, not many issues. Yeah. I like focused conversations. My wife likes rambling conversations. When we get into the heat of the moment and we are addressing an issue, let us address that issue. But we don't have to solve every problem. Focus on one issue, not many issues. You cannot have a knockdown, drag-out fight and expect to fix every problem that you see in your spouse. And some men, they blast their wives for every complaint that they've ever had. And some women have the memory of an elephant and can go back 20 years, and remember something that you said. And there's nothing productive about any of that. Deal with one issue at a time. Secondly, focus on the problem, not the person. The most natural response to rebuke is defensiveness. When someone feels like that they are being attacked, their defenses automatically go up and a wall is built. So, this is not time for personal insults. It is not time for calling names. It is not time for barbs and pushing buttons. No. I come to you with a problem that is bothering me, and I want you and I to work on this together. It is not accusatory. It is not insulting. It is not body slamming you. I love our marriage enough to confront something that's trying to get between us, and I will do all that I can to help you and I in this matter. We're focused on the problem, not the person. Thirdly, focus on behavior, not character. What he did, not who he is. If you tell him that he is unkind, any man can defend against that. But if you tell him the unkind thing that he said that hurts you, now we've got something that we can address. If you focus on his character or her character, that means that they're a bad person. It is your mission in life to fix him. Hey, ladies, there's not a man alive on the earth that wants to be fixed. Not a man. Not a man. So you focus on behavior, not character. Number four. Boy, this is very important. And my dad really should preach this point because he's a stickler on this. Focus on specifics, not generalizations. The more specific that you are, the more help that you will get. You will get into a lot of trouble by trying to solve generalized problems. They are impossible to deal with. What did I do? What did I say? What were the words? Sometimes family comes home and says something that happened at church. Well, being the pastor, let me get on the phone and let me fix this. Oh, wait a minute. What exactly did you hear? What was said? You better be very specific. Number five. Focus on understanding, not on winning or losing. You can win the argument and lose the person in the end. What we want is we want a peaceful resolution and a restored fellowship. And no matter how we get there, when that happens, everybody wins. Everybody wins. Now, let me take 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I've got to hurry. Not everybody has a perfect marriage. If you live in a perpetual honeymoon, then you should be teaching this class, okay? You should be here. If you never have a conflict, if you never have a fight, then please pray for the rest of us, okay? Pray and pray for your spouse. They really need it as well. It's a part of every marriage. It's a part of every relationship. It doesn't have to tear you apart. Conflict teaches us patience. It teaches us kindness. It teaches us compassion. It teaches us forgiveness. And when there's a conflict, here's what it does. It gives you an opportunity to respond to your spouse the same way that Christ responds to you. That's what it does. There is a spiritual application. I want to make it very quickly. When you look at the story that I've given you, Song of Solomon chapter 5, great fellowship, great relationship, something happens, she withdraws herself, he withdraws himself, now there's separation, there's not sweetness, there's not fellowship, there's not intimacy, then she goes and looks for him, and she finds him. Really, you can make a spiritual application as an analogy to the relationship between the Christian and the Lord. Because you and I, when you first get saved, sweet fellowship, intimacy, closeness together, remember that? But then something happens. You withdraw, he withdraws. And that fellowship is missing. You've left the first love. And what happens is you realize, hey, this is not how I want it to be. I want it to be like it used to be. And you go seeking the Lord. And I just point something out to you. The last place that she was with Solomon in chapter 4 was a garden. Now I know it's a euphemism, I know it's a metaphor, but it's a garden. When she returns, when she finds him, you know where she finds him? It's in a garden. And here's the application that I would make to you. That if in your relationship with Christ it is not as sweet like it used to be, and you find yourself away from the Lord, I'll tell you where you will find him. You will find him where you left him. That's where he's standing. At that point, he's still standing there waiting for you. And how sweet it is when you come back to that point of where the fellowship was broken and that issue is resolved. And now there's fellowship with Christ once again. Great story.